All right, here we're looking at section 7.2, and really today we're just going to be multiplying polynomials. That is our big learning target for today. So today I have 3 different examples and 3 different ways to do this. And in reality, I don't care which way you feel comfortable doing. As long as you feel comfortable doing it one way, it doesn't matter. So even when you're doing your homework or working on the quiz or the test, even if it says multiply using the da-da-da-da method, it doesn't matter to me. Just pick a method you feel comfortable with. So one thing is I am going to go through kind of a little complicated example. I'm going to be multiplying a binomial, and I say this is a binomial because there's 2 terms in it, and a trinomial because there's 3 terms in it. And then you are going to take a little bit of time to use that same method to multiply 2 binomials together so we can see it. So this is the sheet you're going to be needing, and on these, go ahead and write out what we're doing. We're going to look at a horizontal method, we're going to look at a vertical method, and a box method. Okay? So the first thing is we're looking horizontal, and horizontal means going acrossways. And I'm going to use different colors to really show what we're looking at. So when I'm using this method, I take the first term in my first polynomial, and I write that out. And then I multiply that times everything in my second polynomial. So I've got x squared minus 3x minus 2. Then I take my second term in my first polynomial, plus 5, and I multiply it by everything, x squared minus 3x minus 2, in my second polynomial. So really I've just distributed this. So I've taken this x and I've distributed it to everything in the other polynomial. Then I've taken my 5 and distributed that into everything into my second polynomial. If I had another term in this first one, I would just do that again and again and again. So now that I've got them all set up, now I can actually do my distribution. So I take what's outside the parentheses and I multiply it by everything on the inside. So I see that x times x squared gives me x cubed. X times a negative 3x is negative 3x squared. X times a negative 2 is negative 2x. Plus 5 times a negative x is plus 5x squared. 5 times negative 3x is negative 15x, and 5 times a negative 2 is a negative 10. So now I've got several terms and I want to go ahead and simplify. So I'm going to start with my largest exponent, and I see I only have one term that has that in it, so I'm going to say x cubed. My next would have squared, have an exponent of 2, and I see I have 2 of those, so a negative 3 plus 5 is 2x squared. Then I have just my 1x. So here I've got a negative 2 minus 15 is minus 17x. And then I have that constant term. So the thing without a variable. So that's the horizontal way to multiply. So I take the first term in my first polynomial and multiply it by everything in the second one. Then I take my second term in my first polynomial and multiply it by everything. Okay, so that's one method. That's one way to multiply these. So now let's look at the vertical method. Okay, so the vertical method we want to organize a little bit differently. And we can do that because we're multiplying. And when we multiply, we don't have to multiply in any particular order. We can multiply in any order. So I always take the biggest one and put it on the top. So I see here I have x squared plus 3x plus 2. And then my smaller one is x plus 4. So I'm just going to write them like this, just like we wrote our big multiplication problems when we were just doing numbers. So now I just multiply my pieces together. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3x is 12x. And I just line things up. And 4 times x squared is 4x squared. Just like I did when this was just numbers, I have to put a placeholder right there. Then I can continue multiplying. X times 2 is 2x. X times 3x is 3x squared. And x times x squared is x cubed. So now that I've done all the multiplying, I go ahead and I add my columns together. So I have 8 here, 12, 13, 14x, 4, 5, 6, 7x squared, and x cubed. And they were all positives. Okay, so that's the other thing to keep in mind here, especially when you're working through this example, is you do have a negative. So make sure that that gets into play as well. But so this, I did the exact same thing as I did up here horizontally. It just looks a little bit different. And sometimes this can be easier to do because we've multiplied large numbers this way for a long time, so we already kind of know how to do this. Okay, so there's one other method that I want to look at, and that's the box method or the table method. Okay, so I'm going to put my large one on the top. So I've got 2x squared, I've got a negative x, and I've got a 7. And then going down the side, I have an x and I have a 6. So here's the table or the box. Okay, so now I can just multiply each individual piece. So 2x squared times x gives me 2x cubed. X times a negative x is a negative is a negative x squared. X times 7 is 7x. 6 times 2x squared, I've got my 12x squared. 6 times a negative x is negative 6x, and 6 times 7 is 42. So now I have all of my different terms and I can combine them. So here's my 2x cubed. Here I've got all of my x squareds. So I've got 12 minus 1 is 11x squareds. Then I have my terms with an x. So a 7 minus 6 is plus x. And then I'm left with that constant at the end. Okay? And when we use this box method or this table method, it will end up pretty nicely that our terms kind of fall next to each other, so we can circle them and come up with our final answer. Okay? So any of these three methods will get us to the same place. It's just our preference and what works best for us. So now I have a couple of examples, and these over here that you're going to work on are just multiplying some binomials by binomials. Okay, so spend a little bit of time doing that as practice. And then you have time to just jump right into your homework and the problems on big ideas. And again, when it says multiply using this method or multiply using that method, I don't care. Your goal is to be comfortable multiplying polynomials together. So pick the method that works best for you and go with that. And let me know whenever you get stuck or have questions.